ITN, the latest national and world news with Mark Austin.
Clashes continue as leaders prepare for Middle East summit. Hijacked Britons heading for home tonight. And a Heskey hat-trick as Liverpool crush Derby.
From ITN, the ITV Weekend News with Mark Austin.
Good evening. Crisis talks between Israeli and Palestinian leaders are due to begin in just a few hours. Both Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat have confirmed they will be at the summit in Egypt. President Clinton is already on his way there. But both sides are playing down any real hopes of reaching an end to the violence that's killed 100 people. And today there were more clashes between Palestinians and Israeli security forces. Our diplomatic editor Robert Moore reports.
On the eve of the emergency summit, some Palestinians are turning on their own leadership, demanding that Yasser Arafat boycotts the meeting and ends all dialogue with Israel. And this afternoon, the anger and bitterness was on display again. Young men saying they have nothing to lose, confronting the Israeli troops. The skirmishes have become a virtually permanent feature of life on the West Bank. Optimism for this summit, now just hours away, appears almost non-existent. And here on the streets of the West Bank city of Ramallah, Palestinians are also calling for Yasser Arafat not to surrender. The fear is of a diplomatic trap. But the Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak is himself tonight under mounting pressure after Hezbollah leaders declared they had captured an Israeli colonel. But Israel says he is a businessman who was kidnapped 12 days ago in Europe. The Israeli power to retaliate was emphasized again today with the release of video from helicopter gunships showing Thursday's air assault on Palestinian targets. The bright light in the center here is the anti-tank missile heading for Ramallah's police station. As Israel buried the second of the soldiers beaten to death in that building by a Palestinian mob, it is difficult to imagine a peace summit taking place in a more ominous atmosphere. Robert Moore, ITN, on the West Bank.
So Robert, with no trust and precious little goodwill, what can we possibly expect from this summit?
Well, Mark, I think that basically the Palestinian and Israeli people have lost faith in the diplomacy. Even the leaders, Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat, are going only grudgingly to this summit in Egypt. Barak under heavy pressure from the Americans, Arafat under similar pressure from the Egyptians and the United Nations. I think the only real glimmer of hope beyond this conflict is that ultimately both are pragmatic leaders. As Barak likes to say, fate and geography means that the Palestinian and Israeli people are destined to be neighbors forever. They must eventually reach some sort of ceasefire and historical accommodation.
But it all begs the question, doesn't it? What happens if it does fail?
Well, Kofi Annan, arriving at the summit tonight, has said that failure is not an option, but if there is no ceasefire, it certainly will increase instability in this region and also raise the spectre of a power vacuum, because let's remember, Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat are inextricably linked to a peace process that is now clearly failing. And in that case, as one leading Palestinian negotiator, Saeb Erekat, has said tonight, in that situation, if their authority is significantly undermined, the situation becomes a nightmare.
Okay, Robert Moore, thank you. The 40 Britons held hostage on a hijacked plane in Iraq are finally on their way home tonight. Some of them could be back in Britain by first thing tomorrow morning. A few moments ago, they landed in Saudi Arabia on the first leg of their homeward journey after spending almost 24 hours in the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. Linda Kennedy has the details.
Any doubts about heading home were finally over tonight as the Saudi Arabian Airlines plane was cleared to leave Baghdad. Before, passengers were searched and their bags screened, part of strict security this time before all the travellers, 40 carrying British passports, were allowed through to the tarmac at Saddam Airport, where first aboard was the young Saudi prince who'd been on his way to London to study English before being caught up in the drama. Now Saddam must decide what to do with the hijackers after his officials negotiated their surrender, which some think he'll want to use to influence lifting the sanctions.
This is obviously part of a pattern of activity on the part of Saddam Hussein, in which he's trying to present himself as a reasonable man and try to say, look, I behave reasonably, the world should treat me reasonably in return.
The passengers spent all day waiting to leave their Baghdad hotel, but not till late this evening did the Iraqi authorities take them by bus to the airport. And after so many delays, the airline has offered passengers the choice of staying in Saudi Arabia tonight or flying on to London. Whenever they land, Heathrow is ready.
Here on arrivals, a special area will be screened off so that passengers and relatives can meet in private. Counselling will also be offered, but it's thought most families will go straight home, happy to be alive. Linda Kennedy, ITN, Heathrow.
Police are investigating the deaths of up to 50 patients at a hospital in Essex. The senior woman consultant anaesthetist at Basildon and Thurrock General Hospital has been suspended. Officers are investigating allegations of inappropriate use of medicines with seriously ill patients after an internal hospital inquiry raised concerns about the deaths. More heavy rain is expected to hit the southeast of England tonight and tomorrow, putting much of the area back on flood alert. Families forced out of their homes by rising water levels today began a massive clean-up operation, but there have been warnings of health risks from spilled sewage and leaking oil tanks. Terry Lloyd reports.
The Sussex town may be getting back to normal, but more rain's predicted, which could see the floods returning over the next few days. Hundreds of thousands of pounds were lost when the River Ouse burst its banks and rushed through the town centre. Some more precious items were gingerly carried away to safety. In the river's wake, emergency mobile insurance officers were set up to help flood victims.
Just the trauma and the heartbreak, really. You know, people have spent all their lives working to put their houses together, and to find that just destroyed in such a fashion, it is heartbreaking. And no matter how many times you see something like this, it just doesn't get any easier to, to deal with. So the teams are out there helping the people now, and hopefully we'll get them back on their feet as soon as we possibly can.
Raw sewage and river water contaminated with diesel fuel flooded into family homes. Warnings have since gone out to be prepared to deal with pollution.
What we want people to do is to concentrate on taking normal precautions when they handle any of the material that's being brought down by the river. We are giving out disinfectant and all sorts of cleaning materials to people with advice.
Safe drinking water is being handed out until tap water and electricity is restored. Amid the problems, a black sense of humour emerged. Lewis has weathered similar setbacks before. But just as the southeast was drying out and clearing up, weather forecasters have warned of more heavy rain to come. People here have been told to stay on flood alert. Terry Lloyd, ITN, Sussex.
And thousands of people have been forced to leave their homes after severe flooding in Switzerland and northern Italy. At least 7 people have been killed as swollen rivers burst dams and swept away buildings and roads. These new pictures show the full extent of yesterday's landslide in Gondo in the Swiss Alps. 13 people are still missing. Rescuers now say they have little hope of finding them alive. 15 people are still stranded on a remote island in the Scottish Outer Hebrides after a cable-laying ship struck the rocks in gale-force winds. The men had to be winched off by helicopter after the ship ran into trouble off the island of St Kilda. The 2-hour rescue mission was filmed by Coast Guards. Here's Harry Smith.
The supply ship Electron had nearly reached the remote island when it lost power and was driven by fierce storms onto the rocky shore. On board were 9 passengers and 6 crew. They'd already tried to launch life raft, but